welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As always, I am joined with Nathan, and we are back to discuss Middlesbrough's 1-0 opening day victory over Swansea City. Of course, the transfer window remains open, so we're going to have to do a little bit of a rewind because, as usual, we recorded last week on the Friday night, and then there was two major stories the following 2 days. So we've got that to look forward to, and obviously games to preview, a bit of cup action during the week. But most importantly, we'll obviously reflect on that lovely opening sunny day victory over Swansea, as I said. Nathan, you're looking fresh. You've got Hackney's curtains by the looks of things developing, a smile on your face. Sunday mornings are just always better after a Boro victory, and they did exactly that yesterday, didn't they?
Yeah, as you were opening up the podcast there, Chris, it was almost a copy and paste job from opening day last season. A 1-0 win over Swansea City to kick off a new championship season with a sunny Riverside. It was, a nice day to get off to a winning start in the championship once again, which is really, really nice. Obviously, we'll get into discussing the game a little bit later on, but we obviously done the podcast last Friday, as you said, and the following 2 days were just mental, especially the Sunday, which we'll definitely get onto. But yeah, a mental week, really, but capping it off with a nice way to get off to a new season of the podcast, I suppose, with a first win of the season to discuss on game week one, which is obviously really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, we do have to rewind a little bit. Now, obviously, during the transfer window, there's always a possibility that you can click finish recording and then there's something straight after. And obviously, given schedules and this, that, and the other, sometimes you don't have time to kind of whip the camera setup back up and start recording. But literally, as you say, we recorded on the Friday. And then on the Saturday, of course, we played Deportivo La Coruña in the final preseason game, and it was fairly sort of there was no real noises that there was going to be anything brewing, and then all of a sudden Hayden Hackney turned up for the game, and we all kind of thought that's a bit odd, maybe he just hasn't done his medical yet at Ipswich. I mean, in fairness, whilst I was editing the podcast on Sunday night last week, listening back to us, we did say there might be a world in which he does say no to Ipswich because we both said we feel a little bit sorry for him. He deserves a Premier League move. And although, yeah, there'll be a financial reward at Ipswich and he's going to go and play for a team which are, I think, the favourites to win the league, it's still a championship club. And then lo and behold, Scott Wilson, who obviously gets major credit for this summer because he's been sort of coming out with exclusive after exclusive, breaks the news that Hayden Hackney had officially rejected Ipswich. So everything was done club to club side. It come down to him. He travelled to Ipswich, had talks with Kieran McKenna and Ipswich representatives, and decided that no, this move isn't for me. Now, obviously, he played yesterday. He even played in the Deportivo La Coruña game. But the situation isn't kind of as cut and dried as, well, great news, Hayden Hackney's staying. There's obviously the added context around what that means for Middlesbrough's transfer business, what it means for potential deals that were lined up. Of course, Scott had also broken the news that we were fairly advanced with a forward because of the incoming money that the club were expecting from the sale of Hayden Hackney. Obviously, that's had to be put on hold now. What were your immediate thoughts, I guess, after the kind of first few minutes of thinking this is amazing because Ipswich have been given it the big in and he's told them, get stuffed, I want a Premier League move. When you'd had a chance to think about the kind of implications of him rejecting Ipswich, where do you stand on things now?
Yeah, I think that I sort of want to reiterate what I said last week, which was that I felt sorry for him, that was the only sort of move that had come up as early as it had in this window, and that Ipswich had met the price that Middlesbrough had set for him. And that hadn't triggered any Premier League club or top division club to do so at that given time. But I think that what he will have been sort of advised is that there's a lot of time left in the window. There's a lot of Premier League clubs that haven't done much business yet, but he may be one of those that is part of a long sort of moving system in which, say, Manchester United at the minute are linked with Carlos Baleba from Brighton, and if they can't get him, then they're looking to go to Wharton at Palace. Well, we know that Palace have been interested in Hackney in the past, so that could be his move if Wharton's on the move. So it's probably gone along the lines of something like that. I think from what we had seen, it was that he'd agreed personal terms with Ipswich, but had then decided not to sign for them. I think that there may possibly be a world where if Ipswich don't move on and don't move on to other targets and sign other players, that this may be revisited later down the line. I'm not so sure, but wouldn't surprise me at all for a player of his ability at this level and going on to sort of the way that we played yesterday as well. I think that it'll probably be within his best interests to look at a style that possibly would suit him a little bit better, I think. But yeah, I think that it's a nice sort of story for from a Middlesbrough perspective that your best player isn't jumping at the first opportunity to a team in the same division as you because of money, but also promotion aspirations. Fair play to him in that sense. But I'm certainly under no illusion that I think that by the end of the window, he won't be a Middlesbrough player.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one because you almost, as you say, you want to think of the good in this. You want to think of the romantic sort of feeling of local lad, local star player rejects uh, doubling his money or tripling his money in favour of staying at his boyhood club. But it feels, and this isn't a slight on Hackney at all, but it feels very much a rejection based purely on someone in his ear saying, just sit tight, things will work out. But as you alluded to as well, I think if that doesn't develop, and look, there's still however many weeks left of the transfer window, I think it's very plausible, as you say, where because at the moment there's been no concrete offer from any Premier League club. That can obviously change as teams get lower down their list, as you mentioned. But as of right now, it is purely and look, I'm sure, as you say, he features on lists, but all of the reports that you see are nothing more than agent talk. It's not like Porto have come back in. Obviously, they had concrete interest and made bids for him in January. There's been no mention of them. It's not like Vandenberg, where there's sort of multiple clubs making offers. There has been Ipswich, and that has been it. And I'd like to think that if we get to the end of the transfer window and there's still no Premier League interest, then I'd rather Hayden Hackney be here than Ipswich. But also, you've got to think if you just sort of remove Hayden Hackney from the situation and think about it just in financial terms and where Middlesbrough are and kind of the noises that we've heard about, they do ultimately need a bit of incoming money, whether that be from Vandenberg or Hackney, to go on and make the sort of 4 or 5 signings that we so desperately need. Now, if that doesn't come in the next week or so, obviously we can discuss Rav Vandenberg's absence from the squad yesterday. I do fear, and it's not necessarily Hackney's fault because I totally sympathise that he wants a Premier League move, and if not, he's not interested, or at least to a top sort of 5 league in Europe. But that doesn't help Middlesbrough at all. And I just hope that if Rav Vandenberg goes, for example, it kind of eases that pressure. But obviously, with the size of the fees, Hackney was the one where you thought that could trigger sort of 3, 4, 5 signings potentially. So a little bit of a waiting game with that one, but it certainly didn't seem to have impact his performance yesterday. He didn't sort of ask to be taken out of the team. He didn't sort of prance round and not do anything and shirk challenges looking like someone that had one eye on a move somewhere else. He just played his normal game. So yeah, as you say, we'll touch on obviously the style, and perhaps as we move through these opening games of the season, potentially something else which may sway his mind is how much is he going to shine in this Middlesbrough team compared to a Michael Carrick Middlesbrough team. I think it ties in quite nicely the fact that there is the whole conversation about Middlesbrough needing money and Middlesbrough sort of struggling to get deals over the line, or waiting a little bit. And it also can be linked with reports throughout the week from both the Echo and the Gazette, which were very keen to highlight, and it did feel like a bit of a club briefing, that Middlesbrough are now more than ever trying to be more of a self-sustainable club. They're looking at players with one eye on sell-on clause, but also getting value for money right now. So you think of contract situations. We took advantage of Callum Britton. Alfie Jones, we took advantage of Hull's transfer embargo and financial issues. And then obviously Kante's one with an eye to the future. I think we were all absolutely taken back when on Sunday morning we got the exclusive from Scott Wilson again that Middlesbrough were in, at that point, advanced talks with Chuba Akpom about a return to the club, because it doesn't fit a self-sustainable model to go and pay his rumoured sort of £50,000 a week wages at Ajax, or even take on half of that, really. There was talk of the deal being a loan with an option to buy if we're promoted for £6 or £7 million. It all seemed done and dusted that he was joining Birmingham, and then we kind of got thrown into the mix. And by tea time, it was he's not coming to Middlesbrough. He doesn't really favour the move, and it all felt a little bit embarrassing, didn't it?
Yeah, it didn't feel like a real link, despite it coming from reliable sources at the football club. It felt like something had been thrown out there to try and pull fans on side a little bit, but then knowing how it worked out, knowing that we were never in the race really. Birmingham had already agreed a fee, that had agreed a deal, and were sort of agreeing personal terms with him. For the initial exclusive to come out that we were in advanced talks with the player rather than with the club, Ajax, in question about a deal, there was no mention of agreeing a deal at the first sort of mention of this happening. At tea time, it then said, "Yeah, Middlesbrough couldn't agree a deal when they realised what was needed to be fronted up in terms of a fee or an agreement." And in the end, it seemed like a bit of a stupid PR move from the football club to throw out a cult hero's name to try and pull fans on side, when in reality, with it working the way that it did, I think that it pretty much did the opposite, really. It alienated a lot of the fan base, it
It
isolated a lot of the fan base.
Yeah, it certainly backfired, didn't it? And I think I was by tea time by later on that night when it became apparent that really we were never kind of, as you put it, in advanced talks with Ajax. I mean, I have no doubt that we made a very big effort to bring him to the football club. And when I say we, I mean Steve Gibson. And I think that's a crucial part of this deal, and just the overall outlook and how it left fans feeling. Kieran Scott was brought into this football club, as well as numerous other additions to the recruitment staff and the scouting network, to run Middlesbrough in a more self-sustainable way, move away from the Middlesbrough under Tony Pulis that would give large contracts to aging players and sign loan players on huge wages and taking the burden on without really any benefit to the football club. This stunk of a Stuart Downing, Jordan Rhodes, Steve Gibson getting involved in football matters when he probably shouldn't, and going to the manager and the recruitment team. there you go. I'm happy to throw all my money at that, work with that. And it just felt totally. I think what I would say is if I'm Kieran Scott and I've been brought in as head of football, the heads of recruitment, as I say, various people who are working tirelessly and then getting, look, social media is one thing, but a lot of fans direct all the criticism there because we've been, slow in this window. I feel like it completely undermines the whole recruitment policy and staff because you've got noises coming out of the club the day before that we've got a deal agreed, but it is hinging on a big sale. We've then got various sort of noises and things like that, okay, well, if Hackney isn't going to go, that Vandenberg money might kick things down the line a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Middlesbrough prepared to pay God knows what to Chuba Akpom with an option to buy. It doesn't really fit the narrative of Middlesbrough don't have that much money to spend. It weakens our negotiating position probably for future targets because if you now go to a club or even discussing personal terms with a player and say, we probably can't pay you that, and then they go, well, hang on, weren't you trying to sign Chuba Akpom, who's on God knows what only a week ago, very, very publicly? I honestly feel a little bit sorry for the recruitment staff on this one because, as I say, I feel it undermines them a little bit. It feels very much like a Steve Gibson decision that I want to sign him and I'm just going to go over everyone's heads. And even if you think in your day-to-day work, if your boss, the person above you, for your specific job, just went right. Your personal opinion doesn't matter for this one. I'm just going to make the decision. You'd kind of be thinking, well, why am I? What am I doing here for then? I mean, yes, ultimately it's Steve Gibson's money, but don't then 4 days later say Middlesbrough trying to be a self-sustainable club and it's about Steve Gibson not throwing more money down the pan and it's about making this football club run smoothly and all be on the same page and run together and then go and publicly say, yeah, Chuba Akpom. And I would be quite confident in saying that Chuba Akpom, up until probably the weekend where we tried to jump in and hijack this deal, had not appeared on any lists in terms of a forward that Middlesbrough were trying to sign. More importantly, if you look at the system that Rob Edwards plays, he doesn't even really fit the system, to be honest. I don't know where he was going to fit in all of this. And I think just lastly, to kind of end my little sort of mini rant on the whole situation, in future, if Steve Gibson's going to do this, please don't make it as public unless you are absolutely cast iron sure that this is going to happen. Because the way it was put out felt like, well, this is happening. Like, we're re signing Chuba Akpom. And look, I will say, I would have been the exact person who would have been delighted, who would have been all giddy that we were bringing back Akpom after everything he gave us in that season under Michael Carrick. But ultimately, we didn't sign him. So it just, as I say, as I started with it felt a little bit embarrassing. It just left me angry on Sunday night, to be honest.
Yeah, as I say, very, very reckless to throw that out into the press and then ultimately be a little bit embarrassed, left with a lot of egg on fans' faces with the excitement and the giddiness of fans in the hours after the first sort of post. Having typed the post on Boropolis on Sunday afternoon or Sunday lunchtime, I thought this surely can't it can't be real. It can't be real from everything that you've heard, as you say, saying that we're waiting on sort of big sales of either Hackney or Vandenberg or both to bring in players and then to sort of throw all of that narrative out the window to say, look, we're going to just spend massive money on Chuba Akpom, a player who was fantastic and is a cult hero and he will be forever for the season that he gave us in 22-23. However, he's left. He went to Ajax. He's done okay there, but he's 2 years older now and he's had one season in the Championship. in his career where he absolutely turned it on and hit fire. And since then, nothing really of note. So it's a romanticism and a signing, and in the end, I'm sort of glad that it didn't happen. It was just the way that it went around it and it being leaked into the press, and yeah, it was just so silly,
Yeah,
really.
I
But yeah,
think I think just to end on the Akpom topic, I kind of just sat on Sunday night and just thought, I wish this had just never been public knowledge. I wish it had been told on a podcast 10 years down the line where Akpom said, "Yeah, Middlesbrough did try, and before I went to Ipswich, I think that's where he's going now. It hasn't been announced as far as I'm aware. Yeah, Middlesbrough did make a big effort to re-sign me, and then we could have all been like, oh, well, didn't happen for whatever reason. But it was so public, as I say, it was just disappointing. But regardless, it didn't happen. He hasn't been announced yet at Ipswich. I'm sure he probably will at some point this week, or Tom Brady will be like giving him a free private jet if he signs for Blues. I really don't know. But anyway,
that was the other thing as well. Just going back,
yeah.
we talked about him being linked to Birmingham, and then the Monday morning it was, oh yeah, Boro were just too late to the deal.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
that's a good
and now
point.
he's going to Ipswich. Absolute tosh being
Yeah.
leaked out into the papers. Embarrassing, pathetic.
Yeah. In terms of obviously, I'm wary. We're 20 minutes in now, and we want, of course, want to speak about Swansea. But just on the point of being in chronological order, we did see early on in the week that Callum Britton was confirmed. We spoke last week about how happy we were about the type of signing, the type of age, and just really a dependable right back or right wing back that we were getting. So brilliant to get that over the line. And then we also did see from our favourite US journalist that the bid for Max Arfston had been rejected, swiftly rejected, I think the wording was, which made it sound like it kind of going even further back was pretty much just batted out of Columbus Crew's headquarters as soon as it arrived. But what we did see was confirmation from Dom that the player wants the move. And despite the Columbus Crew, he is not for sale stance, and everyone going, well, why on earth are we trying to sign him if he's not for sale? Surely we knew about this, or surely we would have checked. I don't believe for 1 minute that Columbus Crew are completely ruling out selling Max Arfston. It is 1,000,000% a complete negotiation tactic, and I still think that it will probably still happen. Obviously, the bid was rejected. I think he scored the night before actually for Columbus Crew, but yeah, it does feel like it's probably too early to say, well, why have we gone and tried to sign him if we knew that? Because let's be honest, if Columbus Crew have their valuation met, I think he'll be a Middlesbrough player by the end of the transfer window.
He's not for sale is one of the funniest sayings.
Newcastle have been saying that about Isak for the whole year, and he hasn't been to training for about a month now.
Yeah, but he's not for sale though for anything apart from 150 million. But once that's met, then he's free to go. So, but he's not for sale. Just remember, yeah, it's absolute tosh, as I say. But yeah, we'll wait and see on that front for the left wing back. I think that that is apparent that we do need someone in there to come in and be a more of a specialist in that role. Really, I think are we covered transfer wise now?
Yeah, I think other than, to be honest, squad news, obviously Vandenberg wasn't in the squad for Swansea because of the fact that there's ongoing interest from German clubs. I think, to be honest, reading between the lines, Vandenberg was very much of the opinion that he was going to Feyenoord. That then hasn't happened, and it's probably made him think, what on earth is going on here? And then Edwards decided against it. So I think you're probably likely to hear something concrete in terms of either another improved bid from Cologne. I thought I was going to butcher the pronunciation of that. But yeah, the German club, I'll just say, this week, or potentially another club will come in and take Vandenberg. So yeah, it's not really much of a change from where we were last week. But yeah, in terms of transfers, I think that's all caught up now. So moving into yesterday's game, of course, in terms of the defence and Vandenberg's admission from the squad, that was really the major talking point in terms of the team news. Neto Borges come out, Callum Britton went straight in, which of course meant that Luke Ayling filled in as the right-hand sided centre back. There was no Riley McGree still, and obviously with Finn Azaz still out, it was Bergzorg and Morgan Whittaker behind Conway. And then, of course, after Ipswich had been served a custard pie by Hackney, we all thought that he was going to play, given that he had some minutes in the last pre-season game. So I think the only real shock was that of Luke Ayling being the third centre half, but actually a pleasantly surprising performance and potentially a view to not a permanent fixture there, but certainly a player that a lot of fans had kind of made their mind up on. Someone that might actually be a valuable member if he is to play as a third centre half rather than a wing back going forwards this season.
Yeah, I was always under the opinion that I think that he would suit a back three, but playing in the three rather than as a wing back. I think what he gives you there is his composure on the ball is pretty good. Having played at a high level in his career, yeah, he's definitely more suited to a back three in this Boro team than he is a wing back. So yeah, I was quite pleased that he was playing there rather than wing back, and obviously Britain alongside him in there was a bonus that he was in the side from the start. I mean, I think that we were all sort of under the impression that he would be, and then obviously Silvera over the other side. We've known that he's been playing left wing back all pre-season. It was apparent that he was going to start this game there, despite not being one. And yeah, going back to my point on Arfston and left wing backs, really, he's obviously not a specialist there is Silvera. So I was interested to see how he would get on yesterday playing in that position and obviously being a right-footed, left-sided player as well. It's a little bit strange for that to happen in left wing back, especially. So yeah, was very intrigued to see how that went, but I felt that the decision made in the team, having watched the game now, but the decision made in the team to have Alfie Jones over to that side to help him out with a lot of the long balls onto Josh Key or Ronald's toe was beneficial to Silvera to help him with someone else over there who's more of a comfortable defender to back him up in instances when he was doubled up on, because for a lot of the game yesterday, that was their plan really, to target our left hand side, to target Silvera. Ronald trying to take him on a couple of instances in the first half and run him in behind. And look, a couple of times Silvera did get caught out, just sort of ball watching, not really knowing where to position himself at certain instances. But I think on the whole, he did relatively okay. He won his headers at a couple of instances, which was really good, especially given he's not the biggest lad in the world. And I felt that he was also pretty good at giving us a little bit of an outlet on that left hand side. He looked relatively comfortable taking the ball. There was only two instances where he got to the byline and his crosses weren't the best on his left foot. But I felt that him hugging that touchline and then coming inside and dragging us up the pitch, but coming inside and then being able to knock it off to Morris and Hackney in there was pretty good. I thought that he was relatively comfortable in his newfound role.
Yeah, and I think just touching on the two kind of defenders either side of that three, we mentioned Luke Ayling. A lot of success was had, especially in the first half. It sort of quieted down a little bit in the second half. But when we speak about Luke Ayling being comfortable on the ball, a lot of switches of the play, and a lot of the time Silvera had, as you say, quite a lot of freedom. He has that kind of responsibility of when Middlesbrough are in possession, being as wide as he possibly can. Especially in the first half, you saw Rob Edwards, obviously him being on our side in the West. A lot of the time in the first half, you saw Edwards saying, get further up the pitch, and time again. And, some of them went a little bit over his head or weren't, inch perfect. But Luke Ayling does have a level of kind of, we saw it when Latte Lath was still at the club. He is quite comfortable with longer passing, crossing, and quite a few times he switched the play, and it was really effective because it left Silvera a few times, as you say, one-on-one with Josh Key, and give him a chance to showcase his ability to just kind of get his head down and be more of a sort of traditional winger. So that was nice to see. And then just touching on, again, Alfie Jones alongside him. And as you say, it proved to be a very good decision ultimately. I mean, Hull fans and a lot of stats, of course, it's still very early days, but we can only judge what we saw yesterday, have been very sort of quick to point out that in aerial duels that Alfie Jones isn't the best. I can't remember him missing a header yesterday. Of course, you know, he's challenging a Josh Key, who's not the biggest, and then of course Ronald as well, who's quite a slight winger. I'm sure heading's not the best attribute in his game, but Alfie Jones, and you summed it up perfectly for me yesterday when you said he is a defender that wants to defend. And I just want you to go a little bit more in detail in terms of what you mean by that, because it's such an obvious thing to say, but I think given some of our defending last season, and you touched on it with Vandenberg's guilty of it at times, almost sort of defending with his aura and kind of not wanting to go and throw himself at things, and just trying to almost an over reliance on his reading of the game to the point where if it doesn't play out the way you expect it to, he's almost stuck in the mud a little bit. Alfie Jones is a go and make the first contact defender, and I absolutely loved his performance yesterday.
Yeah, as I say, a defender who wants to defend, and in instances yesterday, one in particular stands out in which the ball broke in the middle of the pitch, and it was sort of a 50-50 between, I can't remember who their player was, but one of their midfielders and Jones trying to get across and make this ball, and Jones just flew into a tackle, sliding in, won the ball, man's up in the air as well, just won the full lot. And that's exactly what we need. Just players that want to throw the body on the line for the cause. And as you say, those stats that the Hull fans were talking about as well, with him being quite poor aerially, from what we saw yesterday, I thought he was superb, really, dealing with those long diags from Swansea to hit Ronald and Josh Key. He was always over there, tucking in, helping Silvera on that left hand side. So yeah, I was really impressed with him yesterday. I thought that when the man of the match came out and it was given to Ayling on tees, I thought, did everyone like miss Alfie Jones' performance today? Because I thought he was superb, and obviously in the middle of those two is Big Dalo, who, with the captain's armband on, nods in his third goal of the season, if you want to class the pre-season ones as well. Considering he hardly ever scores, I think he scored two goals for Boro before this sort of, well, since Rob Edwards came at the football club. Two goals in 9 seasons, and now three in pre-season and including first game as well. Really, really chuffed for him as a Boro lad to still be here now. And yeah, I think that a back three will suit him as well. We saw him playing in the centre of a back three with Paddy McNair and Anthony Dykesteel flanking him with Warnock and then Wilder as manager. And I thought that that was probably the best that we've seen Dale Fry in his Borough career so far, those periods of time. So adopting a back three once again with Jones probably more likely to his right, I think, as we saw when Neto came on in the second half. Neto to the left, Jones to the right. But yeah, I think Dale Fry could be a really good, or could be in for a really good season if he is that central centre half and can keep himself fit.
Yeah, that's always the thing with Dale Fry. I mean, I know everyone loves Dale Fry, but I've always been of the opinion that a fully fit Dale Fry playing to the best of his ability is right up there with one of the best, just natural. defenders in the Championship. I think lots of times when he was younger, you saw links with Burnley, links with other Premier League clubs, and I don't want to sound disrespectful, but I think some, not many, but some kind of make out that Dale Fry kind of hasn't hit the heights of almost, because he was the next one kind of off the production line after Ben Gibson, and he started so young. I think because of the fact he's been around for so long that you almost forget kind of what an impact he's had at Middlesbrough. And I mean, he spoke so well in his BBC T's interview yesterday about his kind of pride and the fact he's not an emotional character, but even walking in, seeing the captain's armband on his peg yesterday, I think he's 27 now, and kind of just realising I've played over 250 appearances for my boyhood club, and you can genuinely tell in his voice how much it really, really does mean for him. And yeah, I think we spoke last week about the shape and who might be the winners and who might be the losers. If Dale Fry can keep himself fit, I think we'll see him as a major winner under Rob Edwards, both in terms of in his own box and in the opposition's box, to be honest. Because for someone that hasn't scored many, it was a great header.
Oh, it was.
Great delivery as well, I may add, because Morgan Whittaker, in fairness, how many years have we cried out for a decent delivery into the box? And he put 3 or 4 really good deliveries into the box yesterday.
Yeah, he did. I think that's something that they must have worked on, the set pieces. I think we've scored a good couple so far, if you include the pre-season games. But in a game like yesterday, where, okay, defensively, I thought that we were fantastic. We limited them to next to nothing. Ronald had a shot from miles away that was just sort of floating wide. Then the real chance of note was Cullen's header, which wasn't really convincing either. It was a comfortable save for Sol. Those were the only chances that they had in the entire game. And to be fair, from our side of things, going the other way, we didn't create pretty much anything either. Obviously, Whittaker had his speculative effort that for once was sort of on target and looked like it was going to make the keeper make a save, and he did, tipped it over the bar, which would have been a great goal, and I think would have lifted a little bit of a weight off his shoulders as well to get a first competitive goal for Boro. But from that, really, we didn't create a lot at all in the game. So to have a different avenue to scoring a goal from a set piece, which we haven't had really for the last, well, however long.
Since Tony Pulis.
Yeah, literally. And even then, we were crap at set pieces with that big sausage Aidan Flint signed for a massive fee. It's why we can't sign players now, by the way, but that's a different topic. Anyway, don't set me off. But yeah, set plays, really important to have different avenues to score goals. And Whittaker puts in a good ball into the box. Fry gets across his man and yeah, just sort of glances a header into the far corner, gets us up and running for the season. And as I say, in those tight games where there's nothing too much between the sides, especially those opening day ones, they're always cagey, really.
In terms of, as you alluded to, the lack of chance creation and the performance yesterday, I think it would be, of course, winning games of football is always a major, major plus point. But you've also got to look at the things, as I'm sure AD, Harry, or H, as he gets called by Rob Edwards, and Rob Edwards will look at, is the things that we were lacking in yesterday. There's all the positives, and I'm certainly not kind of downplaying the positives of looking really solid, the lack of work that Sol Bryn had to do, just generally the togetherness. I thought he got his subs right, bringing Alpha on and just moving Hackney that little bit higher, allowing us to just sort of, we weren't under any significant pressure, but just add a little bit more legs, a little bit more steel in the midfield to just shore things up a little bit. And actually, I was quite happy with Kante. I wanted to call him Alpha again there. What is Rob Edwards doing to me? Kante's just ability to get involved in terms of ratting about, trying to win the ball back, but also he looked quite confident, and I think there was only once that he gave it away, try to play a pass out to Silvera on his left foot, and it just got cut out. But just kept things ticking, and overall, as I say, a very good at a moment in the game where, as I say, it wasn't kind of crazy pressure, but just to put everything back in terms of us being in control and us feeling comfortable and confident. It definitely helped. But going back to my point on what will be the talking points and what will be things that both the recruitment team and both Rob Edwards will be looking at, I think it's quite clear to see the midfield was bypassed quite a lot. And also, I think Tommy Conway is going to have to bide his time a lot of games this season, and basically be of the opinion, which is what he said, that I might not touch the ball for half an hour at a time, but if I get a chance, my job is to just take it. Very different to the role where he had under Michael Carrick last season, where he often drifted out left. He didn't see an awful lot of the ball yesterday. Worked tirelessly, which is what you're always going to get as a bare minimum from Tommy Conway. But I think those two positions behind the striker, Tommy Conway as the 9, and then Aidan Morris and Hayden Hackney, which we touched on earlier about his decision in terms of what Middlesbrough are going to look like as a centre midfielder who loves being on the ball this season. There's a few little areas where you kind of looked at our performance yesterday and think it may be tweaked, or it might be something which is going to be a recurring theme this season. But either way, against better teams, some people will say I prefer style rather than substance. And for those people, I'm not saying it was a bad watch at all. I'm really, really not, because I am always substance over style. If we win the games, I'm not that bothered. But a lot of the time, as I say, there was spells in the game where it wasn't really Middlesbrough being in possession 10 minutes at a time that you would say under Michael Carrick. It was just a little bit bitty.
Yeah, it was instead of sort of knocking it round the back and in our own half, we tried to knock it from back to front a little bit quicker. We're more direct, try to
Yeah.
pick up second balls into the channels for Bergzorg to run onto, to Whitaker to run onto. My frustration being that when you play those balls up the channel, those 2 10s have to win the ball and get us up the pitch and bring others into play. But we saw too many times yesterday balls being played into the channel and Bergzorg being muscled off the ball very often, and Whitaker either being muscled off the ball or his first touch would invite a challenge in which Swansea player would just quickly nip the ball off him, and they've got us sort of going backwards again, and that can't happen really. I think that the long balls into Conway look fine. However, try your best not to put it on the centre half who stood behind him's head. Just try. Look, if you hit Conway's chest, great. He needs to then try his absolute hardest to hold the centre half off and bring Hackney, Morris, Whitaker, whoever into play. But too many times yesterday, balls are being played up into Conway. And look, I'm appreciative. It's not his game. However, if he's the man that we've got and that we're sticking our hopes on, we're going to have to see improvement of this. If this is the way that we're going to, if this is the way that we're going to play, then we're going to have to see improvement with either him making runs into channels or him being able to let the ball stick a little bit better than it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think it definitely pointed towards, in terms of a recruitment perspective, the striker that we are going to bring in probably will be the more physical, not necessarily head on a stick type striker, but someone that is more comfortable with his back to goal, linking things up, rather than Conway, whose bread and butter is getting in behind. And obviously, things will change the outlook of the team, the dynamics of what does Tommy Conway absolutely love? Balls across the 6 yard box. Callum Britton, I thought, put a few good balls in yesterday, but didn't get too ahead of himself, wasn't flying up and down, but that's to be expected. He come off obviously later on in the game, hasn't played a full 90 all of pre-season. And then of course, even with Silvera having a natural left footer whose first instinct in the form of a Arfston, let's say, when he gets on his left and gets an opening, will deliver a ball on his left foot. You've got the kind of split second of with Silvera at the moment, and I'm not like, again, I'm not having a go at him because I thought he did okay yesterday. I thought he did quite well. His instinct is to get it back onto his right and then deliver. And of course, it's always more difficult when it's a in-swinging ball for a forward like Tommy Conway, rather than something that's going to be flashed across the face of the goal that he can make a run across well, basically to the front post and try and make contact with. So I guess a point that you could flag up, probably going to see a different profile to Tommy Conway coming in. And then, of course, we touched on the midfield. I think Kante looked good yesterday. I actually thought that Hackney did quite well in that sort of left 10 position. We sort of did see it a few times under Carrick, albeit in a different system, but it did work. I think we might, if Hackney's going to be one that stays, we might see a little bit more of that in certain games, which I wouldn't be opposed to. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see when Finn Azaz is back, because those two tens are very much asked to press, press, press as soon as whoever, I guess, the trigger is for the opposition team. It was usually one of Swansea's wide centre backs yesterday that was the trigger. Whether that fits Finn Azaz's game, because it's not something we've seen a lot of him, but obviously you could have said the same about Morgan Whitaker, and he seems to have kind of adapted his game ever so slightly. So yeah, very interesting. But overall, just lovely to get a result. Sun beaming down, and then of course Red Faction having their moment with Rob Edwards at the end. Whether it's to your taste or not, I said to Nathan last night, it's hard not to enjoy a bit of that, isn't it? It's hard not to enjoy a bit of, and people will criticise them, and it'll be the first thing that's used to, you know, be levelled at him if things start going against us or things results turn and we have a few difficult ones. People will throw that at him, but you're not a football fan. You're not a supporter if you don't enjoy a little bit of passion at the end of an opening day victory.
Yeah, it's just funny, isn't it? It's not to some fans' taste, really. Look, I think some people may say, "Oh, it's a bit much. You beat Swansea at home first game, and you didn't have a shot on goal, like in the opposition box in the full 90 minutes." And yeah, but you've won your first game. You got off to a flyer. New manager in the door, wants to become more united with the fan base, pull everyone on side, pull everyone together to charge at the same goal. And yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of a moment with the supporters and feel that unity.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, as long as he doesn't get to Nathan Jones' level of cringe, then it's fine by me. So yeah, just use that as a sort of stick to measure things with.
Just thinking it must be a Luton thing with Jones and
Yeah,
Edwards.
possibly, possibly. Well, maybe. I mean, all the Luton fans, despite the fact he got them promoted, are keen to say, well, it was all Nathan Jones's work. So if Rob Edwards is just going to copy off Nathan Jones, then clearly he's trying to get to that whole. I mean, I'll just wait until we've got a game as the main event on Sky, and he sort of gets on his hands and knees and starts giving it that in front of the Sky camera, crying like a big baby. But yeah, until he does that, then I'm okay with it. Looking ahead, Nathan, and just obviously to finish up, of course, it's going to be a busy week, most likely on the transfer front. I'm sure there'll be speculation of all sorts and different bids being accepted, rejected. Hopefully, in Middlesbrough's case, plenty ones that are accepted. But on the pitch, we obviously play Doncaster on Tuesday night.
Can't wait.
It's going to be one where the fringe players play. We've had some good memories in the cup over the years, but for me, yeah, Dan Barlasses, Law McCabe's, Neto, Alex Gilbert, Marcus Force, them kind of players, that's the game for them to try and stake claim. And again, as long as they don't produce a Stoke at home level performance, then fine. I just hope that a few of them get minutes and impress, especially sort of Force and McCabe. I think especially McCabe because obviously he seems to be ahead of Barlasser in the pecking order now. So that'll be interesting to see how he does. And then of course you have the trip to the Den. Have you got a bet on Josh Coburn 1-0 yet?
Not yet. It's Middlesbrough reserves against Middlesbrough, I suppose.
Middlesbrough B, I think it was levelled.
Well, yeah, but they finished above Middlesbrough A last year, didn't they? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Millwall, one of those sides who you know what you're going to get every year, don't you? Really, and they've got our arch nemesis as manager as well, with ice cold Alex Neil as the gaffer. And to be fair, last season going to their place, the game was relatively even, apart from the fact that our midfield and defence went to sleep for tracking one of their midfielders who ghosted into the box and passed the ball into the corner, and that was all she wrote, really, in a very even game. However, they got off to a flyer yesterday, didn't they, on opening day? I think when you looked around the championship at the fixtures and you'd seen Norwich against Millwall as an opening day fixture, I thought that's one of the standout ones
Yeah.
of the Saturday 3 o'clockers yesterday, because I think that both sides are ones that are going to be knocking on the door of the playoffs or have aspirations of, especially. And that Millwall team, now looking at it on paper, I think there's not too much to dislike about it, if I'm
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, they've really. I think they kind of everyone in the championship almost sort of sat up and took notice when they brought Alfie Doherty in. Obviously, a lot of Middlesbrough fans were really keen for him to reunite under Rob Edwards. Of course, that didn't happen for various reasons. It wasn't a player that Middlesbrough were really ever concretely in for. So yeah, I think a lot of people were disappointed with that. They obviously spent a good fee on Coburn, and is it Ivanovic, the striker?
Yeah.
Who I must admit, every time I've seen him play, him and Coburn seem to have kind of found a nice little partnership together. I know Langstaff come off the bench and scored yesterday, but it is, if you're a Millwall fan, and as you say, you know what you're going to get across their back line, a few familiar faces that everyone's used to by now. And then you add to the mix Alfie Doherty's left foot, who has got a great delivery, and then two forwards. I think Ivanovic just plays slightly off Coburn, but like you said, they're going to be a team that'll be there or thereabouts in terms of the playoffs this season because it. Alex Neil is a good manager in this championship, and in terms of the style over substance argument, it is effective the way they play, and it will be this season.
Yeah, it 100% will be. And they've got some good little players in that team as well. The player that scored the goal against us last season was Negley, he's called, who he came in January. I think he was there, like their joint record fee, I think, when they'd signed Ivanovic. Obviously, they've signed Coburn since, who is now their record fee. But he looked like a pretty neat and tidy, tricky player who, yeah, I was quite impressed by on the day. But yeah, your sort of main man is Ivanovic at the top of the pitch. I think he's got a lot of interest in him from teams. I think Wolves were noted in the press a couple of weeks ago, then Parma as well in Italy. But yeah, they're a good championship team, as they usually always are. And I think I think you could almost put a bet on every single season and say, will Millwall finish somewhere between 6th and 10th? You'd win every year, pretty
Yeah,
much. And obviously, we've got them for first away game for us, first home game for them. So you'd imagine that the Den obviously is a horrible place to go any time of the season, really. But first home game, they'll be right up for it. And if you offered me a point now, I'd absolutely snap your hand off.
yeah. I think this will be a really nice well, I don't want to say really nice, not going to the Den's not that nice for any away team, but a really good measurement. And of course, you've got to add in the additional context that it's still very early on this season, but it's a very good measurement of kind of from the type of players that we've brought in, your Alfie Jones, your Callum Brittons, who have shored up or are hopefully going to shore up our backline, how they kind of acclimatise to that type of atmosphere and deal with going to take a throw in and being called every name under the sun, and just the kind of bombardment that I'm sure will come at some point, because sometimes in terms of you've got to stand up physically to the challenge, but also it's a bit of a mentality thing. And I think we often criticised Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough team last season for their lack of mentality and weakness in situations where, as an unnamed club source said, courtesy of the Echo, it felt in games last season that you were going to watch a movie that you knew the ending of. Whereas I'm hoping under Rob Edwards, in a more pragmatic and stern style, that games like Millwall, you'll be able to see an obvious, right, let's stand up and be counted mentality rather than a I'm going to go in my shell mentality. So yeah, it'll be a good measurement of kind of where we are with that. But I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, we've got a couple more bodies in by that point next week. Maybe another US international potentially, and who knows, maybe it's a forward. That's obviously the kind of two main priorities on the agenda at the moment. So yeah, Nathan, unless there's anything else that you want to touch on, happy to leave it there. Happy to be recording on a Sunday after 3 points, and yeah, Middlesbrough at the moment, I'm wary because last season we did this. We beat Swansea on the opening day, battered Leeds, and everyone thought, I'll tell you what, Middlesbrough are going to be a handful this season. And then it kind of just went downhill from there, didn't it? So let's hope it's not the same again this year.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think that everyone came into the season with limited expectation of where this team's going to be. So one win at home in a game where we didn't have a shot on target in the opposition box and we scored our goal from a set piece isn't going to change my expectation necessarily quite yet, especially with the transfer window still wide open, as Sky Sports would tell us. But yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting week again. Whether Boro do any business or not, we'll wait and see. I think we've said pretty much between ourselves every week for the last 6 weeks. Oh, bound to do some business next week, and then we
Yeah,
don't do anything. So
yeah.
we'll wait and see. But Carabao Cup Tuesdays are well and truly back, and Millwall away will be a very difficult test where I'm going to be honest, I don't expect us to get anything. So we'll reconvene next week and discuss our 1-0 defeat to Millwall with Josh Coburn scoring the goal.
That's the spirit, Nathan. Yeah, it's very, very typical Borough of that to happen. So we'll wait and see if they live up to that tagline. But yes, as always, thank you, Nathan, for your time on this sunny Sunday. As I say, as always, thank you for anyone that has watched and listened to this episode. Please do subscribe on YouTube and also on your audio providers. Obviously, a big thank you for all the support on the first episode, the season preview. Please keep watching, please keep liking, commenting. And yes, we will see you next week, as Nathan says, hopefully not after a Josh Coburn winner at the Den. See you again next week. Thanks for watching and listening.